All right, well, let's get started, everybody. Sorry I had a drink. I'm really under the weather. Actually, everybody in my family is, so sipping tea. Just a quick reminder that Monday is your second preliminary exam. So like the first one, well, of course the first one, it's going to be cumulative. So it's going to cover everything from the very beginning up until what we cover in class this week, excluding the sleep lab. So up until tomorrow's lecture, we have another guest lecture tomorrow. So it'll be worth a few more points. By now, hopefully you have an idea of the types of questions that we ask and the types of depth of those questions. So it should be easier to study for. If you have any questions, you can ask me right now, or you can email me and I'll try and answer those as best I can. The format will be very similar. So some fill in the blank, some multiple choice, some sort of mixing and matching stuff, but again, no essays, because those are really hard to grade. Anybody have any questions about that? And again, it's the same deal, so we'll cover the videos, we'll cover the readings, labs, and then also lectures. I've been trying to post all of the videos and PowerPoints of the lectures. When we have guest speakers, a lot of times they don't feel comfortable having those materials posted, so there are some gaps. But for the ones that I give, if the recording worked, I try and post those. And you can find those on the YouTube video if you're trying to catch up. Any other questions or comments before we jump in? No, it feels like it's been a while. So we're going to do a special Halloween version of ethnobotany class today. Again, sorry I'm not dressed up. If it fell on Halloween, I would have dressed up today. But we're going to talk about plants and rituals and plants and symbols, right? And so this is a nice segue from this module on psychoactive plants and before we jump into plants as medicine, because both of those types of uses of plants also involve a great deal of symbolism, right? Which is important for the setting, like Dr. Merlin alluded to, of the experience, and also for medicine, it's important. The symbolism of the plant is an important process of healing, right? And that whole ritual of getting well. Right. So whether or not you have thought much about this, this idea of plants as ritual and symbolic elements of our culture are really viewed in our everyday life. And so if you're still struggling with a topic to do your interview about, right, you think that your family didn't use any plants, just use Halloween as an example of the way that all of us, and I guarantee all of us, have used plants in some way, right? And it's not the only holiday that we do so. So I'll start off by talking about one of my favorite plant symbols, right? And this is the jack-o'-lantern. How many of you guys carved pumpkins this year? Wow, not very many of you. I guess it's hard if you don't have a lot of space, right? So before we start talking about pumpkins, I'll talk about this symbol, which is the jack-o'-lantern, right? And so this isn't an American invention. This was brought to the U.S. by Irish immigrants. And in the old world, where they didn't have pumpkins, they carved a different plant. Does anybody know what plant they carved back in Ireland? What? Oh yeah, well it's very very close. Yes, I would give that a thumbs up. It's actually turnips, which are similar to radishes, right? So turnips can grow really really big, and so where they don't have pumpkins, they have to carve out turnips. But they still look pretty nice. They probably hold up better. truth be told. So, but anyway, they came to the U.S. and they found that there were pumpkins, which were easier to carve, and they were already hollowed out. So they went with that. And so back in the old world, they were associated, they didn't have Halloween in Ireland. Instead, they had this old pagan holiday known as Samhain, which is a Gaelic festival. And it coincided with the end of harvest. So in most places in the northern hemisphere right now, where winter is setting in, people are harvesting their grapes and their pumpkins and all of their crops. And they tend to have a big celebration because work is done and they've stored up all their food for the winter, right? So to celebrate this, the main tradition was that they would light 2 giant bonfires in these villages in Ireland, 2 enormous bonfires. And the party would culminate sort of in the middle of the night. People would walk between these 2 bonfires, and so you would cleanse yourself of all the gunk and karma and bad stuff that had happened to you previously. Ritualistically, it would burn up and you'd start fresh, right, on the other side after passing through these bonfires. Right? So the name jack-o'-lantern describes this. It's also used for this willowy sort of effect that you get in these bogs in Northern Ireland, where it's also known as a will-o'-wisp. And basically, this methane and phosphine comes up off of these bogs, where there's lots of degradation happening, and it sort of shimmers as if you're seeing a mirage in the hot desert on the horizon. And people call that effect the will-o'-wisp or the jack-o'-lantern, and sort of link that name to this ritual carved turnip, right, that people use. So anyway, so people would go to these bonfires and these parties, and they'd have these carved jack-o'-lanterns with them to sort of light the way, right? So it was a way to carry a tiki torch to the party, and also to use as a sort of gargoyle to protect your house from evil spirits. You go out to this party, you light your jack-o'-lantern with some of the fire from these bonfires, you bring it back to your house, and you park it under the front door, and say, this year, no evil spirits, no bad's going to come to our house, and it's going to protect us, which is why they often have these evil, sort of dark, scary themes to them, right? So the other version of this tale, and of course there's lots of different stories for where the jack-o'-lantern originated, was the story of this drunkard named Jack, and he drank a lot, and he drank so much that he could no longer pay his bar tab. And the bartender started to get mad at him and said, all right, Jack, pay up, or you're 86 and you're never coming back and drinking again. So Jack, like any good fictitious drunkard would do, decided to make a deal with the devil. And so the devil said that he would pay Jack's bar tab as long as Jack gave him his soul in exchange, right? It seemed like a fair trade, maybe, depending on how valuable your soul is or isn't. So Jack says, okay, yeah, sure, pay my bar tab, we'll settle up outside. The devil says, okay, he settles up, goes outside, and Jack says, well, you can't get my soul if you can't catch me, and he runs up a tree, and then carves, in the trunk of the tree, carves a cross at the base of the tree, right? So the devil's like, well, obviously I can't go up a tree that has a cross carved in it. The devil, and I'm scared of crosses, right? So Jack's stuck up in the tree, and there's this cross on the tree, but the devil's still sort of sitting down at the base of this tree. He's not going to let him climb down. So Jack's stuck in the tree, devil's stuck in the bottom, and they're both staring each other down. So they come up with another deal, sort of deal number 2, which is in exchange for removing the cross from this tree, the devil forgives Jack's debt. But so he doesn't have to give him his soul. But the sort of crux of this issue here is that if his soul's not going to the devil, his soul's definitely not going to heaven because he's a drunkard that's been making deals with the devil, so he's not going to heaven. So his soul is sort of stuck in purgatory, right? Neither in heaven nor in hell. He's stuck. His soul is stuck wandering the earth, sort of haunting everyday people, right? So he goes down and he's trying to fight his way into hell. The devil's like, no, you can't come, but I'll throw you a bone. You're stuck wandering in purgatory for the rest of your days, but to make it a little bit easier, I'll give you a little spark from the hell's fire, and you can use that to light your way through purgatory. Jack says, okay. And so the jack-o'-lantern in this story is the symbol of Jack this drunkard wandering through purgatory, which is neither heaven nor hell, lighting his way by the light of a candle, which is in a turnip or a pumpkin. So we've taken this sort of a step further. Nowadays, we travel around and go door to door asking for candy or ramen, and we have these little trick-or-treat baskets that are often shaped like pumpkins, right, which are awfully cute. But again, this also has a root in history back in Ireland, where children would go door to door, again, in preparation for this big Halloween party in Sondheim, asking for two things. So they'd ask for soul cakes, which are little oat cakes that they would use as to sort of cater the party, and they'd put these out and people would eat these. So they'd go door to door and people would pay up and they'd offer up their soul cakes for the Sondheim Festival. And the other thing that you need if you're going to throw a big bonfire party is, what do you need? Wood, yeah, you need wood, right? So the kids would go door to door, asking for scraps of wood to add to the bonfire so they could have these big bonfires. And so this whole thing of going door to door started again with this festival back in Ireland, and we've appropriated it. Now, pumpkins are really cool for a lot of other reasons. I asked you guys if you had carved pumpkins, and many of you had not. In my neighborhood, it's a little spotty, right? But in other neighborhoods that are like famous for carving pumpkins, actually, what are the neighborhoods in Honolulu that are famous for pumpkins? Does anybody know? Is there a neighborhood that's like got the best pumpkins on Oahu? I don't know. I mean, when I grew up in Chicago, there was this one neighborhood where every house on the block would just go crazy. Maybe in Manoa, I hear people do that. But demographers have actually gone out. People that study sociology and want to study sort of the economics and numbers of people living in places and how those are changing over time, like census types, will go and they'll actually census jack-o'-lanterns on people's stoops. And it turns out jack-o'-lantern density is an excellent indicator of economic status in the neighborhood. So the more well-to-do a neighborhood is, the more pumpkins they'll have. So if you're trying to ascertain how well off a neighborhood is, you can go count pumpkins, and that'll give you a pretty good correlation with the wealth of that neighborhood. And so this is just a map from one of these. These aren't real pumpkin photographs. This is just points where pumpkins were found, where jack-o'-lanterns were found from one block from one of these censuses that have been conducted. Pumpkins turn up, of course, anywhere where there's something spooky or where the story involves some sort of great change, right? So you think about Cinderella or Headless Horseman or The Great Pumpkin. These are all a bit spooky, but they all incorporate some sort of metamorphosis, right? And so this is one of these themes that the pumpkin has begun to embody. So the pumpkin transforms into a magical chariot, and then it transforms back into a pumpkin at the end of Cinderella's quest. The Headless Horseman loses his head and transforms it into a jack-o'-lantern and freaks everybody out, right? So it's become, in many stories, a symbol of scary metamorphosis. So that's the pumpkin. A lot of other plants involved in Halloween rituals as well, some of which you probably haven't even considered. Apples is a big one. Does anybody, we're going to limit this to people under the age of, under my age, so anybody under the age of 40 know what this guy's doing? What is he doing? Did you raise your hand or are you just scratching?
Yeah, bobbing for apples.
He's bobbing for apples. Okay, good. So I wasn't sure that people are still doing this because it cannot be hygienic. So it's an excellent way to sort of transfer communicable diseases. But yeah, so some of you know about this, right? It's a game that we play. We bob for apples. And so you throw a bunch of apples into a bucket and you, without using your hand, you stuck your face in the water. It's kind of grossing me out even talking about it. And then you try and grab an apple by the teeth. And then you either get to keep that apple if your family was stingy, or maybe these apples had little marks on them that you could trade in for a prize or something like that, right? So it's a game that I suspect is out of fashion because my kids don't do it anymore, but maybe other kids do. So this is not just a fun game that we play on Halloween these days. This also has its roots that go far back, even farther back than Ireland. And so this probably derives from the time when the Romans conquered what is now Britain, right? So the time of the Roman Empire, and they introduced apple trees. And apples have their origins near Afghanistan, present-day Afghanistan, so that part of Central Asia. But the Romans found these apples and they brought them with them wherever they went, and so they brought them and introduced them into Britain. And what happens if you slice an apple in half longitudinally like this is you see that the seeds in the core form what the Romans recognized as a pentagram, right? It's a five-pointed star, which is the symbol of the goddess Pomona, the goddess of fertility. And so you guys remember the fruit type for an apple? Pome. It's a pome. And so it's named after the goddess Pomona, who's associated with apples because of this pentagram formation. And so in Celtic tradition, they would actually do Bob for Apples. They would play this game, but there was higher stakes, right? So the first, and it would be women, and the first woman who got an apple in her mouth would be the next one to marry, right? Because it was a fertility thing. So everybody wanted to get married, so everybody would go Bob for Apples, and they try real hard. If you got it, you'd get to be married next. And then there was all these other things that I could dig up about apple and how apples were used in association with fertility. So you could supposedly stick an apple under your pillow, and if you could manage to fall asleep with an apple under your pillow, you'd dream of who your husband would be, right? So and then there was other stories that I read where you could peel an apple and sort of like reading tea leaves in the bottom of your cup. The shapes of those apple peelings would indicate sort of who you would marry and how many children you would have and stuff like that. So this idea of bobbing for apples has its origins way farther back than we might have imagined. Corn is a big part of Halloween, of course. There's candy corn, which actually has no corn in it at all. I just wanted to mention, because I really love candy corn. You can only get it once a year. This is made from sugar. It does have corn syrup in it and actually a lot of wax. So you eat quite a bit of wax when you eat candy corn. We produce about 20 million pounds of candy corn each year for Halloween, right? Because you can never find it any other time. And so if you lined up all of the individual pieces of candy corn end to end, it would circle the earth about 4 1/4 times. I don't know why I threw that in there. I just decided it would be interesting to talk about. So marshmallow is another plant that I associate with Halloween. And this actually comes from the mallow family. So this family of plants that includes our hibiscus, are all mallows. Okra is in this family, and also cotton are some of the more famous plants from this mallow family. And it's the marshmallow, which is Althea officinalis, was first used as a medicinal plant. And what happens is if you dig up the roots, and it grows in sort of swampy, boggy areas, you can extract a sap from the roots. And if you aerate it and beat it, it gets sort of frothy, and you can take it for sore throats. And so that's the sort of official medicinal use of the marshmallow plant. And this was the Egyptians that used it that way when they found it. They figured out that it was sort of yummy, though, and that you could mix it with things like nuts and with honey and make this frothy confection that begins to resemble what we know of as marshmallows now. And then in France in the 19th century, people really ran with the marshmallow. It became very fashionable in all of the high-class restaurants to serve marshmallows as desserts. And so they refined it a little bit by adding sugar, and then they would use these egg beaters to really froth it up even more. Today, it's very, very hard to find actual marshmallows made from the mallow sap. I've never actually tried it. I'm not sure where you can go to taste it. Has anybody ever tried one? Maybe you go to some fancy French confectionery shop. But now we mostly make them out of gelatin or egg whites. And that has this nice sort of sticky glutinous structure that makes them pop up better. So we moved away from using these root extracts. So these are just a handful of the plants that we associate with Halloween. And typically I would talk about chocolate or cacao at this point also. We have a whole lecture on that coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'll leave that for that discussion for a later date. But yeah, these are some of the symbolic plants that we associate just with a single day. That's not even really our holiday, we just do it for fun, right? So there's a lot more out there when you start thinking about Easter and Halloween and some of these other, Easter and Christmas and some of these other holidays as well. But probably the culture that's taken plant symbolism on Halloween to the highest level is in Mexico and other parts of Central America, where the holiday is known as the Day of the Dead. And the way that it's celebrated there is this is a day where you celebrate dead relatives, right? So you remember people that you've lost, and typically people will go to the cemetery and have a picnic and spend time with their deceased relatives and sort of hang out with them once a year. So it's a festive occasion, and a big part of it is the making of these altars, which are also known as ofrendas. And so I don't know if you can see this very well. I'm just going to kill the lights for a second so you can see this better. So all through Mexico and Central America, you see these elaborate altars, which are typically three-tiered. And they vary from household to household and from state to state in Mexico. But there's certain components that are maintained. The ofrendas are typically, the traditional ones anyways, are three-tiered, right? So the three tiers symbolize basically the spiritual realm or heaven, the everyday realm or the everyday life, and then this bottom realm, which is the dead, right? The life of the dead. And you can see that the bottom realm is the one that's sort of the most elaborated. And they're typically decorated with a few things. You see these flowers that are sometimes real flowers and sometimes they're fake flowers that are made out of paper. Does anybody know what kind of flowers those are? In Spanish, it's called flor de muerto, flower of the dead. They're marigolds. And so people will plant marigolds, and even in, especially on mainland, you'll see a lot of graves are decorated with marigold flowers, right? So this is a flower that's associated with dead people. These skulls that are really brightly colored and painted are made out of sugar, so they're hard rock sugar that are decorated. You'll typically see this sort of skull or skeleton motifs, but they're not really scary. They're more festive and sort of fun. And so part of this holiday is poking fun at death and making fun of death and saying, even though death isn't something to be feared, death is something that we celebrate. And this is one way that we celebrate with our dead relatives by making these offerings. The other, pictures and then typical food that the deceased would have enjoyed, so their favorite foods. If they liked bananas, you put bananas there. Other types of sweets and traditional foods. And some of these offerings are just beautiful. A lot of times the marigolds form a sort of altar. If you see at the very, very tippy top of that altar, they form this arch, which again is sort of symbolic of this ethereal, spiritual realm. Now, right after I graduated from college, I went and lived in Guatemala for a year working for a non-governmental organization. And they were a traditional Mayan community, but like most of the indigenous communities in this part of the world, they've embraced Catholicism to some extent and have sort of created this mixture of Catholicism and animistic Mayan religion. So they celebrate both components of those beliefs. And this is a picture from this church in this village where I lived in, which was known as San Jose de Petén. It's a Catholic church. You can see Jesus on the cross right there. But in front of Jesus, there are these three human skulls that live on this altar, which is maybe not typical of a Catholic church that you would see here in our country. And the story of who these skulls belong to is sort of unknown. People haven't identified them, but they say that they have these special powers. And so if you need something during the year, you can go to this church and you can ask, you can do what's called a promesa with the skulls. And so you can make a deal, just like Jack did with the devil, and you can say, this year, please grant me a daughter. I've been having trouble getting pregnant, I really want a daughter. Or maybe, please help me have a good corn harvest. Whatever. You can ask the skull for favors. And chances are the skulls will grant you these favors and you'll get your wish, but that wish comes at a cost. Well, I shouldn't say a cost, it comes at a price. And the price comes during the Day of the Dead, where the whole village will go to Mass in the cathedral. And they'll do the Catholic Mass in the Mayan language. And then they'll start ringing the bell. And they'll take these skulls on a procession. And everybody in the whole village, along with these skulls, will visit all of the houses of the people that have asked promises from these skulls. And so in each of these houses, people will make altars, and it's not a very well-off community, so they're not elaborate altars like you'd see in Day of the Dead, but there's certain components on these altars that you have to have if you ask a promise of the skull. So they make a type of hot chocolate made with actual cacao plants, so it's very gritty, and it's not super sweet, and people drink it as a type of beverage. And then they also make these special tamales that are made with a special type of bean called ishperon. It's a black bean that they only use in tamales for this one ritual procession once a year. And they go house to house, they go visit a house. The people that ask the promise of the skulls give everybody in the village a bowl of hot chocolate and a tamale. Everybody eats, they start ringing the bell, and then the procession goes to the next house. And so here they are going, here's a lady with her tamale in one hand, going on to the next house. It goes all night and into the next day. And if you've asked one of these promises of a skull, you have to serve tamales and hot chocolate to the entire village for the next 3 days of the dead. So you don't just get by with one procession. You have to host 3 of them. So you better really need what you ask for. So that was a neat tradition, and there's traditions like that. Sorry, that's right. There's traditions like that all over Central America, right? This is just the one that I know best. So why don't we take a break here, and I'll talk about our plant of the day, which isn't really Halloweeny, but I sort of grabbed it opportunistically because this doesn't flower all that often, and so when I saw that it was flowering, I grabbed it. Let me show you guys. Anybody know what this is? This is the Latin name is Aristolochia. The common name is Dutchman's pipe. Yeah, it's a little stinky. Oops. Yeah, they call it Dutchman's pipe because, well, you can imagine, they in Netherlands and in old Germany, people would smoke pipes, so it's go like this. And so they have the shape of the pipe, and so they named it that. This is just an ornamental one, but this genus is huge, so it's got something like 500 species. And a lot of the plants are used medicinally. And when we start talking about medicinal plants, we're going to learn a little bit about the origin of signatures, which means that a lot of plants are used because they're in the shape of the thing that you're trying to cure, right? And so certain ones of these plants look like a woman's uteruses, and so this was a fertility plant that was taken in certain parts of the world. Other plants like this, these flowers have crazy forms, and so some of them are sort of in the shape of snakes, so it's like a big snake's head. And so people would put these out to repel snakes from their houses if they're trying to get rid of snakes. So those are just some of the uses of these plants, but now in Hawaii we just use them ornamentally. Yeah?
About the celebration,
Mm-hmm.
what would happen if they weren't able to deliver?
If you weren't able to deliver, I don't know. I don't think you wouldn't ask for the promise if you couldn't deliver. But I don't know. That never happened. Your neighbors would probably help you out. Is what I would imagine would happen. What do you think would happen? Spooky. Yeah. So it's more the ritual of the thing than an actual like quid pro quo exchange. So, okay, any questions about Aristolochia or any of the other plant symbols of Halloween? All right. Well, then let's move on to the second part of class. I just want to do a little exercise with you guys, and so this you can be rowdy and shout at the screen if you want to. I'm going to flash some familiar symbols to you, and just as an indication of how imbued our culture is with plants as symbols every day, I want you to shout out at me some of the things, like what is this thing that the logo represents, and then we can talk about what the plant symbolizes and who the intended audiences are. This will sound nebulous, but you'll see in just a second. Okay, what's that symbol? Yeah, so this is the Hawaii Medical Marijuana Association symbol. There's one plant in this one that's marijuana, right? And it's got the symbol of the snake, the cross snake, which is a symbol of international symbol of medicine, right? So if you have one of your first alert medallions, you have that symbol. So it's sort of a cross between the plant and the medical symbol. Okay, we'll start off with the easy ones. Yeah, apple. So surprising to no one, the apple actually has an apple as its symbol. It's no longer rainbow colored. This was back when it was Macintosh, I think. But did you ever think about why Apple's symbol was the apple? And why it has a bite taken out of it? Yeah. Yep, so Macintosh is a type of apple, so it's sort of a riff on that. Yeah.
Isn't like supposed to be like go back to the Adam and Eve and that whole thing?
Yes, it's a biblical reference, right? So the story is that the apple represented knowledge, and Eve took a bite of the apple. Eve took a bite of the apple and received knowledge, right? It was forbidden knowledge, but she learned that they were naked and caused all this trouble, right? And so the apple symbol has this bite taken out of it to represent knowledge, because it's the business that they're in is data and knowledge transfer. And it was also sort of a play on the idea of byte, because byte is the unit of computing and technology. So it was pretty layered. I was sort of shocked to learn how much symbolism had gone into that symbol that I see every day, and how related that was to plants. All right, next one. What is this a symbol of? Wow, good job, guys. You guys know this. Nobody ever knows that one. What is the plant that's on this? Yeah, an olive branch. So why would an olive branch be on the symbol of the UN? Yep, symbolizing peace. So again, it's another biblical reference, which is after the Great Flood, right? Noah's Ark. The bird flew back holding an olive branch, which symbolizes to Noah that the flood had receded and it was time for peace and to resettle the world. And so when you offer somebody an olive branch, in today's vernacular, it means you're flying a white flag, or you're offering peace, right? You're trying to stop war, which is the main function of the UN, is peacekeeping. Oh, I just saw that. Anybody know what that is? Fruit of the Loom. Underwear. So apples, oranges. Not oranges, apples, grapes. I'm not sure what the orange things are. So again, I didn't mean to put all the biblical references in the front. It just happened that way. But Fruit of the Loom, probably nobody gets this because we don't really use this term anymore, but it's a riff on fruit of the womb, which is a saying that it's sort of a way to describe children, right? The fruit of the womb. And so it's back into the 1950s or 40s when Fruit of the Loom was popular and this ad campaign was popular. People thought that was a clever pun about Fruit of the Loom. It's coming off of a weaving loom instead of a woman's womb. Anyway, who's that? Does anybody know her name? Pualani. Right? So the heavenly flower is her name. That's the woman who's depicted. So she's got a hibiscus in her hair, but what's the shape of this profile? I think it's supposed to look like a breadfruit leaf, right? So it's these two big symbols of Hawaii sort of wrapped in one. The hibiscus, which is emblematic of Hawaii, and then also the breadfruit leaf. But we've all come to symbolize this with Hawaiian Airlines. All right. Who's this guy? And what's in his hand? So this is, Siddhartha, the Buddha, and he's holding a lotus flower in his hand. And so lotus flowers come up a lot, especially in Hindu and Buddhist religious imagery, as a symbol. Probably the simplest way to describe it is the idea that beauty can emerge from the muck, right? And so from within the sadness and dirtiness of life emerges greatness, and from the ugliness of a dirty, mucky bog or swamp will appear the most beautiful flowers, which are lotus flowers. And so the lotus flower turns up time and time again in Buddhist imagery, probably for this region. It's really considered a sacred flower. Ready for the next one? All right. Anybody know what that symbol is? No. Well, what plants do you recognize in there? So I heard Ohia lehua, right? What else? Yep, taro. I see a taro leaf for sure. La'e. Yep, I see that. Where's sweet potato? That's flesh. Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Like, oh, you think that's a sweet potato leaf? You think it's actual sweet potato? Yeah. Sure, we'll go with it. Okay, sweet potato. Yeah, so those are the things that I saw, and then breadfruit up by his head, right? So this is the Hawaii State Department of Health. And so, so they stamp their approval on, like if there's an outbreak of some disease in restaurants, are the ones that shut down Genki Sushi when there was. Anyway, I won't go there. But anyway, I find it interesting that the Department of Health in the state of Hawaii, their emblem is all of these different plants, right? And especially food and medicine plants, and ohia, which is a symbolic plant. And it's just very telling to me that it's so that the well-being of people in the state of Hawaii is so tied with plant life and the vegetation around them, right? And so the two are very equitable. So you wouldn't find, I'm from Illinois, right? I guarantee you the Illinois Department of Health does not have any plants on its logo, right? And most places don't. And again, I think this is something that's very special about Hawaii, is people's connection with plants, and especially with food plants and medicine plants. Right? What's this one? Yeah, American Savings Bank. Did you ever, and what's the plant? Yeah, again, it's a taro leaf, another taro leaf. And so here's a quote from American Savings Bank CEO. "It's no accident that American Savings Bank's symbol is the kalo or taro plant. We chose it to remind us of our dedication to the healthy growth of our communities, a uniquely beautiful place we all call home." Yeah, so again, a bank, and you guys learned when you went to the Lo'i o Kanewai that the word "wai," right, or the word "vai." What does that mean? Water. And what's another meaning of "vai" in Hawaii? Wealth, right? So it's no coincidence that their symbol for a bank, which is all about wealth, is this water plant, right? Which is an old symbol of wealth in old Hawaii as well. Who's this lovely lady? Yeah, so the Chiquita banana. But in her hat, interestingly enough, she's a dancing banana, but then in her hat she has more fruit, including pineapples and other tropical things, right? And we're going to learn more about bananas when we talk about plants and revolution, but this was the first company to really brand not just the banana, but to brand fruit. So before the Chiquita banana, fruit was fruit, and you sort of ate fruit. It didn't have a brand associated with it, much less an image, right? You didn't publicize fruit, you just ate it. But the Chiquita banana had songs, and it had this exotic symbol of this tropical, this exotic tropical woman who was dancing half naked with fruit on her head. And so it really exoticized the banana and helped popularize it in the 1940s in America, where most people who ate bananas had never seen one growing. They could never fathom, this sort of tropical wonderland where bananas were growing. It was an important symbol for that reason. Yeah, so if you look closely at the Mexican flag, you'll see a lot of different plants there. But most notably, we can talk about the eagle that's standing on the cactus with a snake in its mouth, right? So the story goes that the Aztecs received a vision from one of their many gods that told them where to build their central city, which is now Mexico City in the Empire of Tenochtitlan. And so they saw this eagle perched on this cactus with a snake in its mouth, and that this was where they should build their Mexican city. And so that's what's depicted on the flag. And I think down below are oak leaves, and then I've not been able to figure out what these plants are to the right of the oak leaves on the right-hand side of that flag. I haven't really looked that hard, to tell you the truth, but I'm not sure what that is. Okay. Yeah, Heineken. And what's the plants in the Heineken symbol? Yeah, hops. We learned all about hops, so I won't go over hops again. So anyway, I just wanted to go over some of the symbols that are associated with Halloween and that with our everyday life. So whether you go to the bank or Genki Sushi or wherever, plants are speaking to you and are telling you things, subliminal messages that are getting under your skin and making you behave in ways that the plants want you to behave and are help shaping our culture and ideas. These plants change over time. So think about the jack-o'-lantern had one meaning back in Sondheim, and it was turnips, but it's sort of been transformed in modern America to this pumpkin. It's associated with fun and with getting candy, right? And the symbol of that pumpkin itself is transformation, so I think that's very fitting. Plants are recognizable and are powerful political and commercial symbols, especially in a place like Hawaii, where we are relatively close living to our plants. So I left a little bit of time at the end for questions, if you guys have any questions about Halloween or plant symbols. Or the exam coming up on Monday. Yeah?
Is there like a reason that we dress up on Halloween?
I don't know. It's fun. What are you gonna dress up for as Halloween?
I'm not.
You're not gonna dress up? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. There probably is. And we could probably look it up, but I don't know. All right, thanks guys. We'll see you Wednesday. Sure.
You said you post the lectures on YouTube under Bot 105 something, right?
Yeah. So if you go to the